Hey guys, today we're going to be building some shelves for the workshop. These are really simple shelves that you can make with regular dimensional pine lumber and a pocket hole jig. I have these shelves running the entire back wall of my shop. They're great for displaying all the junk that I've collected over the years. We're going to use 1-inch pine boards, 8 inches wide for the top and 4 inches wide for the support. You can make them in any length you want, just make sure that the 4-inch wide board is slightly longer than the 8-inch one. We'll need that extra material there to make the triangle supports. It's also important to make sure that the edges of your boards are square. We want to be able to screw them together without having to do any jointing. We're also going to need some wood glue, some 1 1/4 inch pocket hole screws, some 2-inch drywall screws, and some sort of screws to bolt the shelf to the wall. The shelf is going to be as strong as whatever fasteners you use to secure it to the wall. Mine aren't going to be supporting any heavy weight, so I just use whatever screws I have lying around. For tools, all we'll need is a tape measure, a chop saw to cut the wood, a drill, preferably a drill press, a pocket hole jig, and some clamps to hold everything together. First thing we need to do is measure the length that we want our shelf to be. For mine, it's going to be 80 inches. Here I'm going to first cut the 8-inch wide board to length, and then we'll cut down the 4-inch one. We're going to save the extra cut-off portion of the 4-inch board to make the triangle supports. Now, I don't have any special formula for this. You just want to space the supports out evenly. On my shelf, I'm going to have 5 of these supports. I'm not measuring anything here at all. I'm just cutting them by eye. Just going back and forth from 90 degrees to 45 degrees, making these little triangle pieces. This is why when you buy your lumber, you want the 4-inch board to be a little bit longer than what you actually need for the shelf, so you have extra material left over to make these guys. The 2-inch drywall screws are going to go through the long side of the support and into the shelves, kind of like this. Next, we want to pre-drill the holes for those screws. So I'm using a drill bit that is slightly larger than the diameter of the screw, so the screws will drop right in. And again, here we're not measuring anything. I'm kind of going in about 1.25 inches from the outer edge for each hole. If you don't have a drill press, you could carefully do this by hand with a cordless drill. Next, I'm taking the 4-inch wide board, and on the front side of the board, I'm marking the location where the screws will go that will secure the shelf to the studs in the wall. You want to do this ahead of time so you don't accidentally put a pocket hole screw or one of those triangle support brackets in the same spot. Then I'm going to mark the locations for those triangle supports. These I'm just evenly spacing. Mine are coming out to be about 19 inches apart. I'm making a line here instead of a plus mark so I don't confuse the two marks later on. Here I'm flipping the board over to the back side. This is the side that's going to be going up against the wall. I've marked top here so I know what edge is going to be on top. That'll be important later on. And here I'm marking the holes for the pocket hole screws. I'm going with 1 screw about every foot. After marking the locations, I'm going to flip the board over and make sure that none of those pocket hole screws are going to interfere with my mounting screws or the support bracket screws. You can see here that there's one that's just a little bit too close to where I want to put that wall mounting screw. So I'm going to just move this mark over a little bit so they don't intersect. This is the pocket hole jig that I'll be using. This is the Genital Tools version. I got mine a long time ago. I did look on Amazon and you can actually still get them. I like the way that this one clamps onto the board. You could also get one of the jigs from Craig. They're probably the most popular. Milescraft also makes one too, and there's plenty of other knockoff brands out there as well. Before drilling the holes, I want to make sure the depth on the bit is set correctly. We want just the tip to barely poke through the bottom edge of the board. If you have it set too deep or not deep enough, the screws just won't work right. Now we can actually drill the holes for the pocket screws. Here I have the board clamped in the vise with the edge that I marked as top facing down. For this type of jig, you want to clamp the jig to the top edge because that's where we want the screws to come out of. Now we just drill through until it hits the depth stop, and then move the jig over to the next hole, and then repeat for all the holes. For the next part, I like to pre-assemble mine before gluing it up. If you put the glue on it right away and you have any issues, it's going to be pretty messy to try and correct them. So I'm going to clamp the support board to the shelf board, make sure everything is perfectly lined up, and I'm clamping everything down to the workbench so nothing can move. And then once everything's all lined up, I'll drive in the first pocket screw. Here I have the drill set to a lower torque setting. We'll do the final torque after we have everything glued up. And then I'll just repeat this for all the other screws. And once you get them all in, you gotta back them back out again. So here I'm removing the screws, and then we will remove all the clamps. Now that all of the holes are pre-drilled, we can flip the board over and go ahead and apply the glue. Once the glue is spread out, we're going to very carefully flip the board back over, kind of reline everything up. Here I pre-started all of the screws to make it go a little bit easier. And then I'm going to tighten all the screws back down and then put the clamps back on. Now the clamps are probably not necessary since the pocket screws are going to pretty much do their job. But I'm going to put them back on anyway. If anything, it keeps the shelf from moving around when it's sitting on the workbench. Next we need to glue and screw these triangle supports. So again, I've got the screws pre-threaded into them. We'll go ahead and apply the glue. And then I'm just lining these brackets up with the lines that I drew on the board earlier and screwing them in place. Here's a shot of the assembled shelf with all of the triangle brackets installed. I'm going to leave it clamped here to the workbench for 24 hours to let the glue dry. Since the pocket screws are holding everything together, you probably could get away with installing it right away, but I want to go ahead and wait for the glue to dry. I also want to pre-drill the holes where it's going to mount to the studs in the wall. I'm doing 2 holes for each stud location. Now if you're building a long shelf, you're going to need an assistant to get it hung up on the wall. If you don't have an assistant, you can use this cargo bar from Harbor Freight. They're like $17.99 and can extend up to 9 feet. So here I've got the cargo bar set up on the right side where you can't see it, but I'm going to set the shelf on top of the cargo bar on the right side. Then on the left side I'll line it up where I want it and drive the first mounting screw in. So here's the cargo bar holding it up on the other side. Now I can adjust the height here with a level and then put the 2 mounting screws in on this side. And then we'll add in the remaining mounting screws, and we're done. Here is the final product. Now if you wanted a larger shelf, I don't see why you couldn't scale this up. Maybe use a 12-inch board for the shelf and a 6-inch board for the support. And you can go as cheap or as fancy as you want. I didn't even bother sanding the wood on mine, but if you want to, you can sand it, stain it. You could make them out of other types of wood too, oak, maple, whatever. I have a couple in the house that I made from some scrap pieces of oak veneer plywood that I sanded and stained, and those came out pretty good. So use your imagination when building these. So thanks everybody for watching. If you like these types of projects, maybe I'll do some more in the future. See you later. Bye.